Welcome to the Summer Plant Circle for Plant Baby Plant. We're so glad that you chose to join us as we gather the community to raise a garden and raise a ruckus. Even though we are many and spread all over the world, we're going to gather in the spirit of friends, sitting around a summer campfire in the lingering light of the longest day. Together, no matter where we are, let's conjure up those first fireflies, the crickets, bullfrogs in our interspecies neighborhood. But maybe you're in the desert or you're in the city. Who is it that welcomes summer where you are? Please feel free to share in the comments. We'd love to know about your interspecies neighborhood. We gather on the summer solstice, which is an auspicious moment on the earthly calendar, at the peak of light here in the Northern Hemisphere. And it means the luxury of long evenings for us and the height of growth for our plant relatives. This time of year is like a feast for them, and we get to witness the exuberance of photosynthesis in all of its forms, making soil and rain and leaves and fruits and shade and beauty, and we could go on. Have any of you seen that graphic, that video of how carbon dioxide in the atmosphere dips to its annual low as summer plant growth in the north draws it down? I would happily watch that video on repeat. It's a potent reminder of the power of plants as allies in climate solutions. It's why we do what we do, planters. Let's follow the guidance of the natural world and accelerate our planting, our acts of restoration on their behalf. Because while the plant world is doing its best to address climate change, the current administration is doing its worst. There are proposals to accelerate logging on our public lands, to remove protections for endangered species, to increase drill, baby, drill. Not only have they ignored climate science, but are currently dismantling the ocean monitoring network that allows us to even detect the coming changes. Friends, our work must be not only to raise a garden, but to raise a ruckus. Last month, I had an invitation, an unexpected invitation from Time Magazine to identify technological innovations that are defining American life today in the context of the upcoming 250th anniversary. Predictably, the list is heavy with smartphones and batteries and artificial intelligence. So I was really glad to see Bill McKibben's voice there, naming solar power as an engineering triumph that is powering an unprecedented energy transition, where solar power has become cheaper to use than fossil fuels and a powerful tool for addressing climate change. Here on the solstice, on Sunday, I recommend his latest book. It's called Here Comes the Sun, a last chance for the climate and a fresh chance for civilization. I almost turned down Time's request to comment on technology because that is not exactly my thing. But our shared work is not only to restore, but to restory, to offer a different narrative. So I'd like to share with you what I wrote. I chose to name the technologies of ecological restoration as among the most essential tools for this moment. It reads, more than 250 years of exploitation has squandered the natural richness of our country. As we imagine our possible futures, the most important technologies of this moment are the tools of ecological restoration and nature-based climate solutions. These tools can mitigate up to 1/3 of carbon emissions. we can leverage strengths of Indigenous knowledge and climate-smart restoration to heal the ecological damage to our beloved homelands. In this historic moment of reckoning, we have to move. We have to move from an ethic of drill, baby, drill, to the practice of plant, baby, plant. My hopes for Plant Baby Plant are for inviting a vibrant movement of planters to heal land, plant by plant, person by person, to nurture a deeper connection to the natural world, to put restoration tools in the hands of our community to give back to the land. It is such an honor and a privilege to join you all in this work. And I'm going to hand it off to Christie Hinrichs, who will share with us an opening poem selected for this time.
Thank you, Robin. I'm delighted to once again curate our Plant Circle Poetry Corner, and today I have a piece for you about seeking guidance. Before maps, before manuals, before instructions of any kind, there were stories. Stories carried the knowledge of how to live, how to grieve, how to return to ourselves when we've wandered too far from what matters. Facts inform the mind, but stories move the heart, and it's the heart that changes. In order for meaningful cultural transformation to happen, we must change hearts. On this summer solstice, I'm gratefully receiving guidance from Joy Harjo, a poet, musician, storyteller, and the first Native American person to serve as the U.S. Poet Laureate. Joy writes from inside that ancient tradition where language is not just meaning, but medicine. Here is her poem, Remember. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away to night. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life who all have their own tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people, and all people are you. Remember you are this universe. And this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language is, that life is. Remember.
One of our favorite parts of the Plant Circle is sharing a botany lesson, introducing listeners to the gifts of plants. Since our guest today, Margaret Renkl, has just brought a new book into the world called The Weedy Garden, our botany lesson this time is a trip to the garden to look at edible weeds with Tusha Yakovleva, who calls these plants self-growing vegetables. Over to you, Tusha.
Thanks, Robin. And thank you all for joining me in this weedy garden. I can't think of better company on this, the longest day of the year, than to be in the generosity of all of these plants and the people who love them. We are gathered here today at a community garden in Syracuse, New York, which is an Onondaga Nation homelands. And this particular growing space has been established for over 60 years. It was started by renegade gardeners, folks who saw a need to grow food for their communities, and so they raised a garden and raised a ruckus and took advantage of a somewhat neglected, forgotten corner of a municipal property and established a garden. Being that it's a place where soil is so frequently moved, it also provides ample space and opportunities for edible weeds to germinate. So welcome, and I invite you to join me on a little tour to meet a few self-growing vegetables. Being that this is a botany lesson, I must start with a disclaimer. Weeds, unlike other significant groups of plants, do not have a botanical definition. There are no weeds in botany because the definition of a weed is always in the eye of the weeder. It is forever context dependent. But still, there are some broad characteristics that unite them. First, they're vilified in many circles. And second, most weeds share an ecological niche. They are early succession species that thrive in disturbance. So put in other words, they are plants that thrive near people. Garden weeds thrive amongst vegetable gardens because annual agriculture continually resets the successional clock back to an ideal habitat for weeds. So yes, they may get in the way of cultivated vegetables, but they're also first responder plants who specialize in coming in after a disturbance event to knit the soil back together and prepare it for the next generation of plant species. Take, for example, lamb's quarters here, or goosefoot by another name. Their leaf shape is a bit reminiscent of a goose's foot, or Chenopodium album. This is an annual plant who can tolerate a great amount of drought. One of their botanical features, which looks like a white powdery coating along the stem and leaves, are these tiny surface structures that help them reduce water loss by reflecting sunlight. So they're essentially wearing plant sunblock. They can also tolerate a lot of salinity and some pollutants in the soil. So when the soil is upturned, there are seeds that might already be persistent in the seed bank or dispersed by animals readily germinate, and then they very quickly spread their broad leaves parallel to the ground, limiting other shade-intolerant species while helping keep more moisture in the soil. And then when they senesce, their big leafy bodies return all that organic matter and minerals to the soil surface, thus improving fertility for future plant communities. And throughout their brief growing life, they offer a fantastic cooking green that, to my palate, tastes like a nuttier spinach. And additionally, their seeds, a relative of quinoa, can be harvested as a tiny, protein and oil-rich grain-like crop. Or take the humble dandelion, which no edible weeds introduction is complete without. Taraxacum officinale by another name. Here, they're growing as a basal rosette, and this growth pattern is a common strategy among weedy plants and other plants. It offers protection from some herbivores by staying below the graze line of larger animals, offers protections from the cold by staying closest to the surface, helps retain moisture, helps maximize photosynthesis. Great strategy. And, dandelions' famously light airborne seeds can travel far and wide and land in the most inopportune seeming ground. But their big taproot allows the plant to access moisture and nutrients deep underground where it is in places where it's limited at the surface. And so their roots sort of mine the ground for these essential survival materials. And they too, in this way, bring them up to the surface to make them available for other plants in the future. Plus, those deep taproots aerate compacted soils. And dandelions are extremely generous food providers. Every part of them is edible, and so they offer a harvest year-round. My personal favorite dandelion treat are the roots, roasted and then steeped. And when prepared in this way, their flavors concentrate and transform into a sort of mocha-like beverage. Or, for instance, in this plot, among the squash and the lettuce and the blooming potatoes, we find amaranth. This particular amaranth species is called redroot, or Amaranthus retroflexus. They have a reddish taproot, but there are many amaranth species. And like lamb's quarters, they're annual, which means they're focused on quick, abundant seed production. Unlike slower growing plants, they don't have time for secondary defenses. for chemicals that plants use to protect themselves, like, say, the oils in poison ivy. So such so-called weeds are often safer, more digestible, more palatable for our bodies. Amaranths are native to Turtle Island and to northern Andes regions, where they have been cultivated by numerous indigenous communities for at least 8,000 years. But in the US today, amaranth's reputation as a superfood, their seeds are a complete protein, and they also offer excellent hot season cooking greens, contends with the plant's reputation as a superweed. So they're said in some circles to grow against the goals of mass food production. And this is because this strong plant has developed a resistance to herbicides that are applied in monocrop agriculture systems. Something doesn't add up in this story. Okay, and last but not least, we must make a quick stop to greet field sorrel, or Oxalis stricta, or, as they're known in my language, rabbit's cabbage. Often mistaken for clover, but as you look closely, the heart-shaped leaflets and the singular yellow flowers reveal the differences. And field sorrel is unmistakable by their bright, lemony flavor, which lends itself beautifully to similar culinary applications. Say a touch of acidity in a dressing, or a summer soup, or a sorrelade. And in all my years of leading plant walks, this is the plant that I hear people most often recall as the very first bite of a self-growing vegetable in their lives. And this is also true for me, and so I consider sorrel, among their many gifts, a wonderful vessel for childhood memories. Before we leave the garden, which is so hard to do, I have one parting question for all of you. I, like many folks here, feel incredibly fortunate to have encountered Robin's teachings, particularly about stepping into right relationship with the good green world. And for a long time, I've wondered, what would it look like to direct those teachings to so-called weeds or even invasive plants? So if you have a response to the following question, I'd love to see your thoughts in the chat. The question is, if plants are the oldest teachers, what can we learn by listening to all of them closely? All right, and now back to you, Brian. Why don't you give us some updates about the movement?
Thank you, Tusha. I don't know if we've mentioned this before, actually, but Tusha and I were graduate students of Robin's at the same time, and hiking with her through the woods taught me at least as much as any of my classes did, and now you can all see why. So that was a huge gift. Thank you. So I'm Brian Ratcliffe. I'm the executive director of Plant Baby Plants. I'm calling in today from the greater Philadelphia area, southeastern Pennsylvania, and I'll be sharing a couple updates from the movement. I'd like to begin on a personal note, one that's fitting, given that today is Father's Day, at least celebrated here in the United States. And I just wanted to say, if you are lucky enough to still have him in your life, you should text your dad today. But since our last plant circle, my partner gave birth to our second child. So I have spent the majority of this quarter on parental leave, helping meet and take care of my new little family. And so I just wanted to say thank you to this incredible team for giving me that quiet time that my family needed, especially to Ann Siqveland, our not quite new anymore director of partnerships and development, who really stepped up in a major way to keep the fires lit while I was away. So thank you to Ann and the whole team. And if you'll indulge me, I just wanted to share a tiny story about the name of my child. So my son, his name is Salix, which is the Latin word for willow, and in fact, the name of the whole genus of all of the willow-containing species. Willow it has long been known to be a medicine, both for people, right? It has in its bark this compound that relieves pain, reduces fever. It's related to aspirin, but it's also medicine for the land. It's widely planted for restoration, for reducing erosion, for restoring riverbanks, for creating habitat. And my wife and I gave him this name with the hope that he, like us, like all of you, would find his unique way of being medicine for land, right? Finding his gift. And that's what this whole movement is about. So I just wanted to share that. as I share the updates from the movement, I will say, coming back from leave into this season has been an absolute whirlwind because it's been a huge season of plantings for us, metaphorically and literally. I want to just zero in on two highlights today. First, our blooms, and then our action spotlights. So blooms, of course, are our in-person gatherings. So most of the time, although not always, they coincide with some speaking appearance by Robin. So she has some pre-existing commitment. Hundreds, or if not thousands, of people come from the tri-state area to hear her talk. And then we step in to partner with a local organization to create side events that can help direct that wild, amazing, hopeful energy that she channels at her events, right? Direct that into concrete, life-sustaining action. They're one of my favorite opportunities for us to really advance our goals of healing land and building community and growing power. And they give us a chance to shine a spotlight on some incredibly amazing local place-based organizations who are the ones ultimately who receive all of that enthusiastic labor. Blooms are really a key element in our vision of seeding this grassroots movement of restoration and, as Robin mentioned, restoration. And we've now produced something like a dozen of these, including 4 in May alone. Since our last plant circle, we've supported events in Portland, Oregon, with the support of the University of Portland, in Kansas City with the Mid-Continent Public Library and Bridging the Gap. We've been in Syracuse, New York, with the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York. We've been in Minneapolis with the Minnesota Division of Indian Work, as well as Milkweed Editions, the publisher of some of Robin's works. We've been in Philadelphia with We Are the Seeds, as well as the Philadelphia Chamber Music Society and the Heartwood Trio. And we even helped co-produce a bloom up in Calgary, Alberta, which is our first international bloom by Modern Borders, although, of course, still here on Turtle Island. And I wish I had time to just tell you about each of these at length. It would take up the entire rest of this episode. So I will refrain, but I will say, check your emails. We've described each of these in recent newsletters. And just thank you to everybody who came, all of the partners who helped produce these. I was there in the Philly one, and it was just such a humbling, energizing experience to see hundreds of people gathering around this work and really supporting each other in raising gardens and raising ruckuses. So before I move on from blooms, I just want to make an invitation. If you are interested in planning your own bloom, please reach out. So you can always reach us at hello@plantbabyplant.com. Because as part of growing and widening our movement, we're very interested in scaling up these blooms beyond Robin's physical appearances. We're preparing toolkits and resources for how to pull those off. So if you are a place-based organization working in the cultural or environmental space and you are looking to draw in extra help for the work that you are doing, and or if you are a traveling change maker in your own right, an author or a musician or a theater troupe or a scientist, and you are looking to translate your gatherings into these joyful blooms of restorative action, please reach out. Let's chat. hello@plantbabyplant.com. Okay, now speaking of change makers, I want to talk a bit about action spotlights. So these, of course, are your actions in the world. These are these gifts that you are planting literally and figuratively, because thousands of you every day are taking countless heartfelt, meaningful actions every day at every scale, as individuals, as members of groups, and we are so eager to be a platform to help document that, right, and really celebrate that. And so I'm so grateful to the dozens and dozens and dozens of you who have taken that step to submit your stories to us via this online form. We really think it's so important to be offering this counter narrative of regeneration, right, in contrast to the doom and destruction that so often passes for news right now. And it's been so exciting to come back to work and just see. We've had twice as many submissions since the last plant circle, and they keep pouring in. And I will say it's my favorite thing to be at my desk working and then get a notification that another planter has submitted another action spotlight. They're my balm. And so my second invitation today, which is, I guess, really my second and my third, it's a two-parter. But first, just do yourself a favor and go read some of these. There's a link down in the description for the video. But I really want you to feast your heart on the descriptions of the community gardens, home gardens, pigment gardens that are out there where people are growing natural dyes. There's habitat restoration projects. There are artistic offerings like an original storytelling musical and a retelling of a Celtic folktale. So awesome. There are mobile edible farm stands. There are little native plant houses, which are like, those little libraries that you see outside people's houses on a pole. This is like that, but it's for information about native plantings instead of books. I gawk at them. I love them. It's my favorite thing to do. And so I invite you to do the same. And maybe you see where my second invitation is going. Tell us more. Tell us your story. What is that you are planting? What is the gift that you are offering in exchange for the abundance of the natural world? Please tell us. We are gardeners in our own right, right? We are growing a garden of stories, and we really want 1,000 flowers to bloom. So please make my day. Submit your story. The submission link is down in the description as well. So with that, I'm going to move us away from movement updates and turn our attention to a wonderful partner of ours. So Robin always likes to say that here at Plant Baby Plant, we are not reinventing the wheel. So if there is already a great idea or a resource or a campaign that already exists, our role is to amplify it and champion it, right? We want to be the matchmaker between that gift and the broader community. And that is exactly how it went with the Less Lawn, More Life campaign. The moment we learned about this accessible, free, bottom-up program that makes it so easy, and I will say like really fun, to transform your lawn into a thriving habitat, we were totally sold. We knew we wanted to step in and just help spread the good news. And so earlier this month, Robin sat down to interview the organizers of the Less Lawn, More Life campaign. They have a discussion around the program, its origins, everything they've learned so far. They're sort of midway through this 12-week challenge right now. So we are about to share an excerpt of that interview. It's been edited down for brevity. If you like what you hear and you want to listen to the full version, you can find that on our YouTube channel.
So we are joined today by two amazing humans who are the sparks that gave rise to the Less Lawn, More Life campaign with whom Plant Baby Plant is partnering. And we're honored to have with us Joanna Hall, who is the CEO of Wildr Places, whose bold vision is to rewild America 1 yard at a time, and by Zoe Evans, who serves as Vice President of Partnerships for Wildr Places. She's also the campaign leader and coach for Less Lawn, More Life. And we're grateful that you have taken time away from planting to join us. And I think that the best place to start would just be with each of you introducing yourselves and then telling us a bit about Planet Wild, about Wildr Places, and the Less Lawn, More Life campaign. So, friends, what are you up to?
Thank you, Robin, for having us here. I manage the Less Lawn, More Life campaign. We've got over 25,000 people across North America working to give back a part of their yards or any space they have. It could be a balcony as well, to nature to support wildlife. And I come from spending the last few years working with homeowners who want to do this on their own. They want to DIY. And part of what we've learned is that there's so many incredible resources out there, but it can still feel really intimidating. So what we try to do with this campaign is serve up a science and research back series of steps that you can take to make a difference and give you resources and point you in the right direction at the right point, and then provide extra tools along the way to help it happen.
So my background is actually quite different. My background is in software innovation and technology, which often surprises people. We have for the past 10 years or so run, my husband and I, it's a bit of a family business, a local ecological landscape design firm called Planet Wild. But actually my primary day job was working and running a software innovation studio. But always on the side, I've been obviously personally obsessed and very passionate about nature, but also watching the movement grow and grow very locally here in our region. And I sort of began to see it as an opportunity to kind of merge my two passions and say, hey, we know that if we could leverage technology to make this movement, to make the science, to make the inspiration more accessible to more people, perhaps we could make all of this go faster.
Well, that is a powerful combination of skill sets. And as you say, perhaps a little bit unexpected, but you really turn both of those tools and approaches to this beautiful work. I want to read to our listeners who might not be as familiar with your work yet, a quote from you, which I really love because it resonates with me because it's so aligned with the plant baby plant way of being as well. To seed change by drawing on people's love for the land that you both just evinced, drawing on love rather than fear. And the quote that I want to share is, in the face of unprecedented ecological collapse, we aim to transform America's 44 million acres of lawns, more land than all the national parks combined, into vibrant native ecosystems that restore nature. We believe that positive change happens through inspiration, not fear. When people experience the joy of watching butterflies in their garden, hear birdsong return to their neighborhood, and feel the satisfaction of contributing to something bigger than themselves, restoration will become contagious. And that metaphor of a contagion of restoration is really powerful. And I would love to hear from you both about, what do you think are the drivers of that contagion? What are the tools of inspiring the change that you are hoping to provoke?
I love this question. And it's funny because we talk about it a lot as a team. We talk about it as this moment, this tipping point. And when a homeowner, a land steward, an individual sort of has their own aha moment, their own moment of wonder with nature, that suddenly becomes a beautiful slippery slope to doing more restoration, more time outside, more planting native plants. And so, it's sort of for varies for different people, but is it the first time that you've seen a hummingbird, right? Is it the first time that you've planted something yourself and then you actually noticed that it attracted and supported wildlife, the very wildlife that it said it was the host plant for? These are the small moments of wonder that sort of get people a little bit addicted to say, wait a minute, that actually worked, right? And part of the reason that we developed the app was to sort of make it more accessible and easy for people to sort of reach that tipping point, that moment, because we were seeing it locally here with Planet Wild with clients.
Yeah, I think another piece of it is a sense of agency. And so much of, what's happening around us, we can feel like we have no control and no way to maybe make change. And there are so many ways, whether it's planting a plant, removing, something that's crowding out species, if it is, telling a neighbor about this, all of these ways that we can have agency in our own backyard to affect positive change, and then also remember that we are not separate from everything. And so I think that's part and parcel with that feeling of wonder, of remembering that we are actually a part of all this and that we have a role in stewardship here. Like, we are not just supposed to step back and do nothing or impose our will upon everything, but to be in relationship and conversation and dialogue with it. And I think what I've seen a lot when I work with coaching clients and with all the folks in the campaign is that remembering there's so many different ways to make a difference, whether it's planting a plant or turning off your lights at night, you are helping steward all of this and you can make such positive change.
One of the other things that sets your work apart, which I find really interesting, is that you chose to build Wildr Places, which is a conservation-focused organization, as a for-profit company rather than a nonprofit. And I'm so interested in what drove that decision, and what have you learned about pursuing environmental impact within that business framework?
So it's interesting because it took us about a year to debate back and forth. Should we be a nonprofit or a business? Sometimes we still debate because we are so mission driven, and most folks think that we're a nonprofit and they're surprised when they find out we're not. A few factors. First of all, many of us on the team come from the nonprofit sector. The reality is, given the state of federal funding and the lack of agency that nonprofits sort of have, we decided that it would be a good idea for us to sort of control our own destiny, frankly. We actually had applied for an NSF grant for a very similar model for the app, got really, really far, did a tremendous amount of work, and then all of the funding dried up. So we realized we want to build this. We think the world needs it. And so what is the funding mechanism that's going to give us the most flexibility, right, to really pursue this and bring it to market as quickly as possible.
And I think another side of this that we've thought about, though, is the reality of being in a capitalist society and what it means to be a human in this moment in time. And the fact that, we've looked at, past movements like organic food being one of them. And there being this inflection from when it goes from nonprofit kind of academic status to a business, to something that people can buy. Like, we're used to buying things. And so there's this piece of right now, this is a relatively niche movement. We've got hundreds of thousands of people doing this, but we need millions of people on the ground doing this. And to move from this kind of like intrinsic motivation to do this work to something even bigger, a hypothesis we have is that, working within kind of capitalism, giving people an opportunity to put money where their, where their mouth is on things could be one of those drivers of change. But we are very clear that the things that we've built so far are going to remain free because we want as many people as possible to access this. And then we'll figure out the rest.
We know that there is a massive need for a huge restoration economy that does not exist right now. Most, folks, laborers, kids, teens, anyone doesn't really know how to do restoration work. There's a massive gap in terms of the need and the capacity to fill it. We sort of have this dream that in the future, why wouldn't, my 14-year-old son who's looking for a summer job be able to join the app and get paid, right, by individuals, right, and whether it's municipalities, whether it's large landowners, to go and remove invasives. And then they get trained to do that and then get, paid to do that, right? All these individuals that dedicate their time, their work to restoring nature, they do it for the love of it, absolutely. But there's also a world in which they should be compensated and we should be valuing that. So these are just, very far off, but these concepts that we want to remain open and flexible for.
That is so exciting, and you've given us I think, a really intriguing and sort of magnetic goal to reach for, and that is your phrase of a restoration economy. That to me hits the marks of biocultural restoration, of biomimicry that aligns our economic system with ecological need. And what a powerful combination that could be. Zoe and Jo, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And I have to tell you, I'm feeling very inspired, and I know our plant circle is too. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having us. What an absolute delight to be here with you.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much, Plant Baby Plant. We love partnering with you guys.
Yes. Let's cause a ruckus.
Welcome back. Now we have come to the final interview of this season's Plant Circle. Robin sat down with the author and former New York Times nature columnist Margaret Renkl for a beautiful conversation that ranged from Margaret's childhood spent in the woods to the power of quiet voices to seed cultural change. As before, we couldn't include the full interview here, so what you're about to hear is a preview, but I urge you to listen to the full conversation. And again, you can find that on our YouTube page. Enjoy.
We are delighted to welcome author Margaret Renkl as our guest for the Summer Solstice Plant Circle, as she sets an example for care and explores our relationship to the feathered and to the leafy world. And you might know Margaret best as a frequent contributor for 9 years to the New York Times as a regular opinion columnist. And man, I was delighted to know that there was room for nature and wonder in the usually grim news landscape. And I've always looked forward to these gems, which remind us that the news can, and I think should, include the goings on of our more than human neighbors as well as ourselves. Margaret is also celebrated as a best-selling author who has twice received the Southern Book Prize. Her books include Late Migration and The Comfort of Crows, which I love the way it is described as both a love letter and an elegy. It balances the wonder of backyard ecosystems with the sobering realities of climate change and species loss. And I love to dip into the comfort of crows, Margaret. It really does bring comfort. And there's usually an idea or an image that sticks to me like a burdock in the best way. It really stays with me. And then in your work, Leaf, Cloud, Crow, A Backyard Journal, one review captures its essence like this. I urge you all to go explore. If you despair at the loss of ecosystems and the damage we have done to the wild world, Renkl's words and the lessons she imparts are a balm for those who wish to do better, see better, and of course, write better. Her particular backyard is in Nashville, Tennessee, which is full of birds and bugs and plants and wildlife, a place that she has intentionally created for their well-being. And we're so excited to talk with Margaret today about all of this and especially about your newest book, your debut children's picture book called The Weedy Garden. And in closing of our introduction, I want to say that Margaret, for me, embodies Mary Oliver's prescription when she says life in 3 steps, instructions for living a life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. Thank you for telling us about it, Margaret. And thank you for joining us at Plant Baby Plant. It's a deep honor to speak with you.
Robin, the honor is all mine.
Well, when we are gathering around Plant Baby Plant, a reminder to all our listeners that Plant Baby Plant aims to inspire and encourage hands in the dirt and other direct actions for regeneration, for protection. And your books are so full of these really practical ways that you have chosen to interact with the living world, making habitat. I especially like the way that you talk about removing perils for wildlife, and it models this really compassionate relationship with the natural world. And could you tell us a little bit about where did that orientation come from for you? Who were your teachers in this approach to relationship with the living world?
I think my teachers were the toads and the blue jays and the pine trees in lower Alabama when I was a child in the 60s and 70s. You know, in those days, people didn't exactly supervise their children, and they certainly didn't entertain them. We were allowed to go anywhere our little feet could take us and stay as long as we liked. We just came home when we were hungry, and where we liked to be was the fields and the woods around our house in lower Alabama or on our grandparents' farm. And it's I think children are born with that sense of curiosity. I'm watching this again with I watched it with my children. I'm watching it again with my oldest grandchild. And so, you know, when you marry, I guess, inborn curiosity with a landscape that's alive, then you come away with a sense of neighborliness. These are your neighbors. These are your friends. So that was just my orientation to the world all the way through my childhood and my older youth. But when I got to college, my senior year, my last quarter, I took an environmental biology class. And it was the first time I understood that my love for the natural world, the world that has always been my solace and my comfort in times of struggle, that world was actually very deeply imperiled, and I had not understood that before then. So then from then on, from 22, I walked side by side with grief and love. And I think when those feelings are so, so clear and so constant, then the very next step is always, what can I do? What can I do?
Well, you know, I love this relationship between your training and your practice as a feral child, right? Um, as a journalist, as a writer, as a thinker, and also as fluent in biology. That's so clear in your writing that you have the vocabulary that spans all of that, which makes, I think, your writing so inviting. And Margaret, your question, your remark about what can I do is at the heart again of Plant Baby Plant, because Plant Baby Plant really has emerged out of this impassioned question that we get from readers, I'm sure you do too, of what can I do? Particularly in this political moment, what can I do in resistance to the dismantling of environmental protections as the living world just frays at the edges? And one of the ways that we try to answer that is to say, well, let's together raise a garden and raise a ruckus, thinking that we have not only to have direct action for healing land, but also acts of resistance. And I'd love to hear what connection you might see, if any, between land care and resistance. Is the kind of habitat care and the knowledge sharing that you do as a writer and a practitioner, is that in some way an act of resistance?
I'm not a marcher, Robin. I'm uneasy in crowds. I always feel like crowds are just one click away from throwing rocks. And of course these days gathering in crowds invites a kind of danger. But I do feel that talking and writing are weapons in their own right. I'm grateful for the people who do see that as part of their mission, but it is difficult for me. And so I'd rather write. I'd rather write and I'd rather talk and I'd rather put a few little signs around the edges of my yard. We are on a corner lot, and so I have a sign from the Xerxes Society that says this garden is protected from pesticides for pollinators, and it has a QR code that leads to the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation's website and explains more about how pesticides are problems for the pollinators and other insects. And then I have another sign on the other side of the yard that explains why I leave the leaves. And then I have another sign that says it's a certified wildlife habitat. And I just think that these kinds of things demonstrating that this way of being is viable, but more that it is, I mean, it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. And so, I think that planting a garden that others can see and perhaps hope to emulate, and then having some information either in a newspaper or in a book or on a blog or in some sort of comment section of one of those things is maybe a gentler and slower way of resistance, but I think it still works as resistance. And also, you mentioned the Weedy Garden, my picture book. I do have this secret feeling that I might be deputizing all the second graders of America to this mission. And I have a little neighbor his mom texts me, "Oh, Walter made us plant a pollinator garden." And then I get these periodic updates from Walter, who's 3, about all the things that he wants to do in their yard because his mom has read The Weedy Garden to him. So I hope this keeps happening, slowly. I'm patient.
Oh, I love that. And to me, that is the heart of resistance, right? You're showing another way. And not just keeping that to yourself, but sharing it with others, to seed the change that we want in the world. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That connects to a question that I wanted to ask about one of your New York Times columns. Uh, to nurture nature, neglect your lawn. And I love that. It's really at the heart of so much of our work, where you write, we are not powerless. We can train our eyes to see the perfect lawn for what it is, a field of poison. And when we remember, as you share with us, that lawns are, 40 to 50 million acres across the United States, the changes that we make in our so-called residential or domestic landscapes really matter. And out of your experience with your neighbors, with your sign, I'd like to hear also about your yard. What is like the small first step that someone who has a lawn, who has been persuaded by you to think, no, I do not want a field of poison in my neighborhood. Where do you start? What are some recommendations that you might offer to folks?
I think that's such a good question, although I know you know the answer better than I do. I just think that the where to start is often where we get in our own way, because the discourse online can be so strident and so full of vitriol that people can come away from this movement, loose as it might be, thinking that if they can't do everything, there is no point in doing anything. And that's our real struggle, is to convince people that, you know what, if you love daffodils, it's okay to love daffodils. If your mother planted that patch of daylilies, as long as you're keeping it under control, you're not letting it spread into the ditches and the wild spaces, you can have that too. It isn't a matter of giving up everything you love, especially the things that you love that are part of your own human heritage. So yes, it's fine. I read an article in the Times a year or so ago about somebody who hired a native plant landscaping specialist, and they killed everything, all the turf grass, and started over. But it was a $30,000 operation, and not everybody has that kind of startup fund, to say the least, or the strong back, or the time. So I always say, start by stopping. Start by giving up the fertilizer that ends up washing into our waterways and causing algae bloom into, our creeks and rivers. Give up, and which, by the way, is made of fossil fuels. Give up the sprays you put on the yard to kill the insects. People are terrified of ticks. I understand that, but there are ways to avoid ticks without poisoning every other crawling thing in the yard. Give up the Roundup to make it easier to weed. You'll feel happier if you get down in the dirt and you let those microbes that are in the soil waft up and stimulate the serotonin in your brain. You just will be a happier person. And it's okay if it gets a little weedy in places. Those kinds of things, I think, when you stop poisoning, when you stop fertilizing, when you stop spraying anything into the trees, into the soil, into the shrubbery, you have the wild world move in. And then the natural next step is to say, oh, I didn't know I had bluebirds. Oh, I didn't know I had uh, rose-breasted grosbeaks coming through every May. What can I do? What can I plant? What can I do to help do a little more? And then in stages, and it expands. And I think that because that's how it worked for me. That's how it worked for me. Not just loving, but moving from love to helping. I don't think little Walter in my neighborhood is going to grow up to spray his yard with poison. I think that his garden has taken root, and it's a quiet thing his mom has done, but it will, I think, save him and save us in the end.
Yes. And that notion of it's a quiet thing is so powerful, I think, and reminds me of um, a conversation a written conversation that I heard about in your decision to step away from the writing for the New York Times in this moment, when I read your words on this quiet voice. You wrote, in a burning world like this, there is less and less room for the quiet voice of a generalist who dislikes arguments that land like a 2x4 across the brow. There is less room, too, for editors who encourage that kind of writing. And this is this notion of the quiet, patient voice that tells the story, that changes the story, that plants those seeds. I'd be really interested if there's more you'd like to say about the power of the quiet voice in seeding cultural change.
That's so interesting, Robin. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I have to think about this for a moment. There's an essay by Wendell Berry, the great agrarian poet from Kentucky, who also writes novels and essays, and who actually does lead protests, and he has camped out in the governor's office in protest of surface mining, mountaintop removal mining, and and he wrote this essay. I think it was maybe 1980, maybe earlier than that, about resistance and about movements. And he was writing in response to a book of poetry about the Vietnam War and the need to resist evil actions on the part of a government that is funded by and speaks for its people. And he made a point that I think I had never really considered. He said that these movements, if you expect change to come immediately or even within your lifetime, you're going to be gravely disappointed. That isn't how long-term lasting change has ever worked. People plant the seeds generations before somebody else sees the flowering. And I that helped me because it does sometimes feel like futile action. Like I'm pushing that stone up the hill like Sisyphus. I'm, tilting at windmills. It and yet to understand that it's part of a generational thing gives me comfort. I don't have to do it all in my own yard, and I don't have to do it all in the world. I just have to keep doing what I think is best, and as much because it offers me comfort as because I think it makes a difference. I think quiet is okay. Slow, quiet, that's okay. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not the only thing, as Wendell Berry has demonstrated in both his own writing and in his life. But collectively, it's a whole lot.
I wanted to close with a quote from Mary Oliver that seemed to me to be so aligned with the weedy garden. And she writes, We don't matter so much, but the children do. Show them daisies and the pale hepatica. Teach them the taste of sassafras and wintergreen, the lives of the blue sailors, mallow sunbursts, the moccasin flowers, and the frisky ones, inkberry, lamb's quarter, blueberries. Give them peppermint to put in their pockets as they go to school. Give them the fields and the woods and the possibility of the world salvaged from the lords of profit. Stand them in the stream, head them upstream, rejoice as they learn to love this green space they live in. And thank you. I think you have done exactly that. So thank you for all of your work in shining a light on the world we live in and heading us all upstream.
And thank you for doing all those things and more, Robin. Thank you.
Thanks for a great visit.
And with that, we close today's Plant Circle. Allow me to offer just a couple gratitudes and acknowledgements before we do. First, to our special guests, Zoe and Jo from Wildr Places, as well as Margaret Renkl. Thank you all so much. What a gift it has been to share your stories and to hear your wisdom. To Tusha Yakovleva, who not only keeps all the moving pieces of these plant circles in motion, but also throws in some botany lessons on the side. So thank you so much. Much, much gratitude to Amelia Mathews-Pett, whose work in the video and audio editing made this whole thing possible for you. To Alexa Dawson, the talented musician whose music graces the intro and outro of our plant circles. Please look at the link in the description and listen to her music. She's extraordinary. And then to the broader Plant Baby Plant family, including Ann Siqveland, our wonderful board members, Christie Hinrichs and Jeni Shirley, our social media whiz, Selah Moore, and then our Bloom hosts, our designers, our funders, our legal team, our friends, our advisors. Thank you all for the countless ways that you are all helping to bring Robin's vision to life. And most importantly, to all of you, the planters, to everybody watching right now, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Whether you're with us now today on the summer solstice or whether you've found this video way down the road, it's such a privilege to be here in community with you. You are the Plant Baby Plant movement. And thank you all for answering the call to raise a garden and raise a ruckus. So with that, I'll see you at the next Plant Circle. Let's plant, baby, plant.
Cast your eye on the mighty oak, ragged branch outstretching. All that grows here above the ground is consequence of what's below. Every acorn the branches bear promise new beginning. Hidden treasure within the earth, they tell the story